Okay, so it looks like that the broadcast has started, and I'm just waiting for people to show up. So I guess that's what we'll have to do. Okay, so it looks like, and I'm just waiting for people to show up. I guess that's what we'll have to do. Hi, so yes, hello everyone. I can see you here on the chat, and I think we'll start now. So I can see your comments. So if you have any questions, you can just ask me in the comment box, and I'll see them and answer them as I go about the session. So, hi, you know me, I'm your captain Pragya, and today we're going to cover basically different styles of poetry. So, I hope you guys can see the screen, and there's something written on the screen. I've opened a document that's titled The Free Verse. Can everyone see that? Can I just get a yes or a no if everyone's here and can see it? Um, I need some response so that I can start. All right, great. So that's just one yes. Where's everyone else? Did they just leave? Okay, I'll just wait for two more people. Okay, so it says let's begin. Yes, even I want to begin. So I guess just two or three people were joining in. So let's just wait for 2 minutes and let them see the message on WhatsApp. Some people haven't seen the WhatsApp message. So we'll just give them 2 minutes to join in. Is that cool? Oh, I'll just message on the WhatsApp group. Yes, someone messaged on the WhatsApp group, so it's just. So, how many of you attempted the task, and did you see the feedback that I gave you on the task, and did you work on that feedback? Can I just have a yes or a no or something? Otherwise, I don't know if you guys are online. All right, cool. So I guess there are enough people tuned in right now. So let's just start, okay? So the first thing that we'll go through is something that you guys have already been through, which is the free verse, right? So what is the free verse? Free verse poetry, like I've written here, is about free flow of expression. And the idea is to write poetry that doesn't have a specific meter or rhyme. Okay, now all of these words, meter, rhyme, they sound like buzzwords. So I'll try to sort of explain them to you, right? So, what is basically a meter? A meter is a flow of the poem. Let's just say, in a very raw sense, it's simply the way the poem goes, right? So, the meter has something to do with syllables as well. Now, what are syllables, right? That's one basic thing that we ask ourselves when we talk about poetry. So syllables are basically the way we pronounce words. So say for example, I say the word history, right? So it's composed of two sort of distinct noises, sounds, which is his and his and story, right? So all these distinct sounds that exist within words and between words, all of these are called syllables, right? So syllables are something. Just give me a second. Right. I hope the noise disruption is less now. So syllables are something that form a very intrinsic part. So as we go about reading more and more in today's session, you'll get a more better idea of what how exactly we read out syllables and what exactly they are, right? So let's move on. So when we're talking about free verse, and this is something that I saw in what most of you wrote, the idea is not to completely omit any rhyme or rhythm. Okay, so free verse, although it's about writing without any rhyme and rhythm, it basically means that the entire poem does not need to follow a specific rhyme, right? So when we are kids in English class, we are taught that a certain poem has a rhyming scheme, which is A B or BAC or all of those things, right? So free verse necessarily does not need to follow any such rhyme scheme, right? But it does not mean that even say in between verses you're not supposed to follow any rhyme scheme. For instance, let us look at this poem. It's a very famous poem by an author called by a writer called Maya Angelou, right? So let's look at it, and this is free verse, okay? So let's look at how the poem goes. Let's just read it out. So it goes like, you may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dust, but still the very dirt, but still like dust I rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. So in the second verse, you see that there's a rhyme between gloom and room, right? So although the first verse does not follow a similar rhyme scheme, however, she does not completely omit rhyming words. So even if you see in the subsequent paragraphs, you can see that there are various, like here, bowed head and lowered eyes weakened by my soulful cries, right? So she does use some sort of rhyming scheme in her poetry. However, like the rhyming scheme itself isn't consistent throughout, right? So that's the entire idea of the free verse. Does anyone have any doubts with what I said so far? I'm also waiting for other people to respond on the live chat so that I know that you guys are paying attention. And if there are any issues, like if you can't see the screen or if I'm not audible, please tell me right now so that things can move smoothly for the rest of the session. Right. So, all right. It seems like there aren't any doubts in that case. So, yeah, basically the idea is that even when you're writing free verse poems, don't just like separate lines like like people tend to write poetry in a manner where they simply put indentations in the line, and then they don't really, the poem itself does not really have a rhyme scheme, or does not really have any rhythm, right? So rhythm is essentially much different than a rhyme, and I'll tell you what I mean by a rhythm. So a rhythm is something that goes like a flow. So when you're reading poems with a rhythm, you can see that the words or the verses or the phrases, they interconnect. They're sort of telling a story, right? Like you can read this poem, like let's read another verse of this poem. So she says, just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I'll rise. So you see that there is a certain sort of a meaning to this, like, like she is contrasting certainty of tides against hopes, and some sort of imagery existing there, right? So it's important that you note down all of these things, and it's important that you understand that free verse is not simply about just going all out with it. And sure, if that's what you feel like, you should do it. However, it's also about having a story to tell, right? So necessarily, so we'll also look at other styles of poetry where you can just go all out about your emotions and just talk about yourself, and but that's certainly something that does not happen in free verse, right? So free verse does need, it needs to have some sort of a rhythm to it, it needs to have a story, it needs to have a flow to it, right? So even though we call it free verse, however, in its very sense, uh, we need to have certain regulations that we would put on other forms of poetry in order to make sure that the poem is something that the reader identifies with, right? So there's this thing, right? Why do we write? We do write for ourselves, but then there are also, we do also write for other people, right? We also write for our readers. We also write to tell a story to people who cannot write a story on their own, right? These are very important parts of writing, and free verse is a very integral sort of a storytelling platform that has come up lately, which a lot of people identify with because it's not very complicated like other things. It does not is very it's not very dependent on rhymes and all of those technical things. So it's something that people largely identify with, and that's why people read the free verse poetry, and that's also why people write free verse poetry. However, we need to make sure that our poetry holds certain meaning in it, right? So, and that's what I believe, and that's something that can be done by the use of rhymes, rhythms, other poetic devices like alliteration. I know I talk about alliteration way too much, but it's something that's a very important poetic device. It just creates this flow. It just creates this flow in poetry, and it makes sure that there is some sort of a rhythm while reading it. So I think with that, we'll move on to our next kind of poetry, which is a haiku. And I think this is something that a lot of people had some sort of doubts with, I guess. So let's move on, right? So, and we'll come back to the fevers because I guess a few people haven't joined the session yet. So we'll just come back to that at the end of the session to make sure that everybody is on the same page, right? So let's talk about haikus, right? So traditionally, when haikus were written, they had something called a syllable count to them. Now, what I mean by syllable count is that, say, for instance, like I was talking about syllables before, like whenever I read a certain word, let's talk about the word. Uh, just hold on for a second. Right, I'm so sorry. Someone messaged on the group about how to access the. Oh, anyway, let's move on. So, right. Hello, Sarah. So, haikus. You're talking about haikus, right? So, what are basically syllables? So, let's say I'm reading a word traditionally. So, there were three types, different sounds that this word constituted of, right? Traditionally. So I'll say that this word traditionally has three syllables to it, right? Within these syllables, there are certain syllables that are less dominant and certain syllables that are more dominant, which means that while I'm saying the word, I'll put more stress on certain part of the word and less stress on the other part of the word. Let's say for the word traditionally, the shna in the middle is something that's a more recessive sound, whereas the tradish and the nully are something that have more prominent sounds in the word, right? So these are called the weaker and the stronger syllables in any word, right? So this is something that you need to keep in mind, right? Because it's important for later on as well when we talk about sonnets, right? Oh yeah, Ankita, yes, in the first, right, in the last you were discussing, yes, there's a rhyme in lies and lies, right? So yeah, that's what I was talking about. That free words does have rhymes. I don't know why it's like people have this idea that free verse is just doing whatever you want. Like you can do whatever you want. I'm completely for that, but poetry should have some integrity, and I think like just in the name of free verse we cannot let go of all of it. So anyway, we were talking about haikus, right? So like I was saying, so there are certain uh, weaker syllables and there are certain dominant syllables in every word that I read out. So that's something that's important to remember. Now let us talk about certain general characteristics of an haiku, right? So the first characteristic is characteristic characteristic. I'm so sorry. Characteristic is that it is of three lines, right? So every haiku has three lines in it. So the first line will say something, and the second line and third lines, like you know what that means. Right. Right. Also, this is very important. So originally, haikus were themed around nature, and this kind of a poetry form originated back in Japan, where they mostly used to use haikus to write about nature and the various things that they saw in nature and the various, all of those things were what haikus used to be about back in the day. Okay, so that's about haiku. So and also they used to follow a syllable pattern. So if suppose there are three lines, the first line will have the first and the last line will have the same number of syllables, whereas the third line can have different number of syllables. So usually the syllable count traditionally used to be 5, 7, 5, right? So it means that the first line is supposed to have 5 syllables, the second line is supposed to have 7 syllables, and the third line is supposed to have 5 syllables. So let us look at a haiku with a syllable count. So here's an example I've written. Is this something that I can call a haiku? This is very simple, right? So it has three lines. It has the first line has 1, 2, 3, and 4. I've underlined some and thing differently because they form different syllables. The second line has 3 syllables that I can call a haiku. So the last line also has 4 syllables. So technically, because the first and the last line sort of have the same syllables, it can qualify as a haiku. It's not a traditional haiku where the syllable count is 5, 5, 7, 5, but this is something that we wouldn't call a haiku, even if though it follows certain rules like syllable counts and number of rhymes. This is something that we wouldn't call a haiku, right? Because of the reason that it does not represent any fresh ideas. It does not represent any creativity. It's just like some lines that I've just indented and just said कि अरे मैंने कर दिया बना दिया haiku. That's not how it works. So um, right. So, what is then a haiku, right? So earlier, basically, if you look at the oldest of haiku poets, so let's look at this poem by. I'm talking about this poem, the last one basically. So this is by Kaboyashi Isa. He's a Japanese haiku poet. So let's read this. It says, "Everything I touch with tenderness, alas, pricks with pricks like a bramble, right? So this is one of those poems that follows the 575 rhyme, 575 scheme, and it's about it's something related to nature. It talks about a bramble, it talks about tenderness, it talks about how thorns, like the thorns of the bramble prick him, etc. So these are some of the traditional haiku, like Kabuyashi Issa is one of the traditional haiku writers. So he basically follows in most of his poems, he follows the. Does it specifically have to revolve around? Sarah, we are coming to how haikus have changed over the course of the years. So I'm just coming to that, right? So yeah, so traditionally, like poets like Kabuyashi Isa used to write them, and they used to follow this sort of a tradition where they followed the rhyme scheme as well as they wrote about nature. But now things have changed, right? Because you can see, as you can imagine, the 575 scheme becomes very restrictive in nature, and usually it hampers creativity. So modern haiku poets have sort of, they've let go of the syllable count and the restrictive nature of the syllable count. So now haiku poems have moved away from nature as well, like Sarah pointed out. They have moved away from nature, and at the same time, they also do not follow the syllable count anymore. So let us look at this example. It's this one, right? The blood red dawn, duck hunters crouch behind a blind, right? So this one does not follow the syllable count, and even though it talks about nature in itself, but there are other haiku poems that, and in fact, you can write one that isn't about nature. So go ahead if you like this kind of writing style. So let's also read this one by Yosa Buson. It says, a summer river being crossed, how pleasing, with sandals in my hand. So this is one very popular and one very simple haiku that simply puts out a story that tells about him crossing the river in the summer and how he finds it pleasing, and it's pretty simple. So there are also very extremely simple haikus like this, and there are some more complicated ones like the one we read before this. So this is, I guess, all for haikus. Does anyone have any questions? All right, Ria has no questions. What about everyone else? Are you guys not watching? इतना बोरिंग भी नहीं है. आई नो थोड़ा है, बट इतना बोरिंग भी नहीं है. Hmm. Or you guys could just say something so that I know you're here and I can move on to the next, the next type style of poetry. Yeah, yeah, that's a good point because they are brief and yeah, they are nice. Even I like haikus, except like I don't really ever understand how to write any, and I've written microfiction, so but yeah, not haikus at all. So I'm in fact I should also give it a try, and all of us should give it a try. It's a good kind of form of writing. So yes, now let's talk about something more fun. So limericks. So limericks are basically kind of funny poems. Sometimes they usually used in a humorous manner. They're whimsical, or they talk about things that don't really exist. They're just they're kind of a very laid back kind of a poetry style. And so they also have a specific rhyme scheme, which is AABBA rhyme scheme. So and there are actually, like, I mean, it's not a very popular sort of a style of poetry, but you wouldn't believe, like, there are so many limericks in the English language, and many of them are written by this writer called Edward Lear. I don't know if you guys have heard about him, but you should definitely go on Google and check him out, and see, like, he's written like hundreds of them. So, and then there are also many other poets who've written limericks, and I don't remember if you guys. So there was this poem in I think 12th grade. It was called the Melon City. It's by Vikram Seth. So basically, that poem itself makes the use of limericks within, like, it's the rest of the poem. So yeah, they're kind of usually humorous or satirical, or written to kind of humor you. That's what limericks are. So we'll read this one limerick here. I've copy pasted here. It's by Edward Lear. It says, "There was a young lady of Ride whose shoestrings were seldom untied. She purchased some clogs and some small spotted dogs, and frequently walked about the ride." So you can see here that the first, which is, I just write here, which is A, the first and the last side united, seldom who's, yeah, right. So you can see that these words kind of, sorry, this is B. Clogs and dogs kind of rhymes, and ride and united. I don't know why that rhymes, but apparently it does. So we just say it does. Ride and united. Well, if you go by the syllables, it does sort of rhyme, but that's basically what happens. That's basically the kind of poetic rhyme scheme that's followed in the limerick. And usually they're short. So limericks do not usually have multiple verses. They're short, and they're just this. But some poems make use of limericks within, like, the bigger, like the larger part of the poem, as say, as you know, certain characters within a poem are talking in a very absurd manner, or there are certain animal characters who are talking in a very absurd manner. So usually that part of the poem is written in the form of a limerick. So it's used in a variety of poems otherwise. So I guess that's about for limericks. Does anybody has any have any doubts in about limericks? You want to know more about it? Tell me your thoughts about it. What do you think about this kind of style of poetry? Anything at all that you want to say, so that I don't have to speak for a while. Yeah, usually it is five rhymes since it follows like a certain rhyme scheme. It is usually a five lines. Can we say limericks in another name for funny poems or lines? Right, it is a short poem because it limericks are usually only this long. So they follow. So what I meant was, yeah, this one is a it's a complete limerick. So it's like, do they always strictly have to follow the A rhyme scheme? Yes, Ria. So limericks have to follow the AABBA rhyme scheme, and that's kind of a strict rule. Uh, no, it's not restricted to three lines, Ankita. It's restricted to five lines. So as we can see here, because of the rhyme scheme that's followed, it's restricted to five lines. So coming to Sarah's question, yeah, so this is a pure limerick, right? So limerick is also a form of poetry as well as a poetic device used within other poems. So when I was talking about Vikram Seth's poem, what I meant was that he used limericks as a poetic device within his poems to write certain part of it. but this is like a pure limerick. So this is an independent limerick. So limericks as independent entities or independent poetry styles, they are usually just 5 lines long. Did I miss? The Tale of the Melon City is not purely a limerick. That's what I meant. That a certain part of it, some part of it, is has makes use of limericks as a poetic device. So this poem is a pure limerick. I hope that clears your question, Sarah. Can we say limericks is another name for funny poems or lines? No, we can't say it's another name for funny poems, because see, funny poems can be of many types. I can write a full rhyming funny poem, or I could write a funny sonnet, or I could write a funny couplet, or I could write anything that's funny. Funny is a very broad category. Actually, can I elaborate on that? How is Limbi as a poet, as you're referring to humor or satire? Uh, yeah, I'll just come to that. Right. Yeah, so I was saying कि, it's not a funny name for a poem, because funny poems can be of many other kinds. So limerick is a very specific sort of a funny poem, right? Which is sort of whimsical and sort of silly, and it just uses random words. It like, look at this. It's just saying something random. There was a young lady of ride whose shoestrings were seldom untied. Like, it makes no sense. So limericks are usually a different category of funny. Right. So how is limerick used as a poetic device? Are you using to the use of humor or satire in a poem? Can you please elaborate? So let me give you a better example than the Melon City. So there are certain poems which have particular characters in them, like say a particular person who is being portrayed as dumb or something, so that person doesn't make any sense or doesn't talk any sense. So this particular person, the lines of this particular person, the words that this particular person says in a poem will usually be written in limericks. So, for instance, I have a frog who doesn't I have a silly frog on the tree in my poem who's not making any sense, right? So now I have to write the lines of this or what this frog says. So I'll probably say ki matlab and then the frog says that there was a young lady of ride whose shoestrings were seldom untied. She purchased some clocks. So like if you look at this particular limerick here, and I put it in a larger narrative poem, right? So for instance, I'm writing a poem that about some rabbit that is on a quest, and he meets a frog on that quest, and the frog tells him a riddle, and the riddle itself is a limerick. So this can be the riddle. There was a young lady of ride whose shoestrings were seldom untied. She purchased some clocks. So this could be a riddle, right? But it is also a limerick or a poem in itself. So that's what I mean when I say that limericks are used as poetic devices in longer poems that are telling a story. Does that make it more clear, Sarah, or do you want me to give another example? Okay. Yeah, sure. So, this that's all for limericks, and yeah, let's move on to the next set. Yeah, so yeah, you can do that. You can, like, limericks are a very flexible form of poetry, and oftentimes they are in fact used to do that. Even if you read a lot of Shakespeare's works, he's used a lot of limericks in his works to describe the way a certain character is talking, etc. So yes, absolutely, limericks are in fact also used in various kinds of works. So yeah, yes, Molly, you're right. So Now let's talk about sonnets. I think this is something that most of you have had like some sort of a problem with, and even I have a lot of problem with this, to be honest. Like sonnets are usually very more way more technical than other forms of writing, and kind of go over your head, tend to go over your head. So, but we'll try to sort of dissect it. So, basically, sonnets were popularized mostly by Shakespeare. So, he made the use of sonnets in various of his plays and stories like Romeo and Juliet, etc. As You Like It, and the we all know the Seven Ages. That's also no, that's a monologue. That's kind of a sonnet monologue, but let's not get there. So, yeah, so sonnets are basically popularized by Shakespeare. So, we'll first look at sonnets in a more generic sense. So, let's talk about sonnets in a more generic sense. So, in a more generic sense, they're basically lyrical and they're usually 14 lines long. And they have one or more of the conventional rhyme scheme. So, a very basic sonnet, which is not a Shakespearean sonnet, like Shakespearean had his different kind of nitty gritties going on in his sonnet, something like that guy was crazy. But in a very generic sense, sonnets are basically 14 lines long, and they're basically lyrical. So they're like any other conventional rhyming poems, right? So you don't have to worry too much about it. It's something that's completely understandable and doable. Right. So, in context to Shakespeare, usually all of his sonnets have 14 lines, where the first 12 lines are separated into three stanzas with 4 lines each. So, if anyone of you have read the Seven Ages, you can see that they are basically separated in no, not the Seven Ages. The Seven Ages actually does not qualify as a sonnet. Let me just I need to take another example. Also, yeah, I forgot that sonnets are usually about, they're more about love. So Romeo and Juliet had a lot of sonnets, and we probably take up an example. Haiku is restricted to 3 lines. Yes, Sankita. Haiku is restricted to 3 lines. Yeah, so we'll take an example of a sonnet in a little while. So let's just talk about कि मतलब हो क्या रहा है यहाँ पे. So right. So basically, and the last, so it says that the first there are three stanzas with 4 lines each. So that makes it 12 lines, and the last 2 lines are represented by a rhyming couplet. So we'll also cover what a couplet is in the next slide. So, sonnet is written in something called the iambic pentameter. So now this is like kind of कि भाई iambic pentameter होता क्या है? So, and this is why I was talking about when I was talking about syllables a while ago. So I was talking about a stronger syllable and a weaker syllable. So iambic basically means an iamb is something that is let's say that has a weaker syllable and a stronger syllable. So, like I've given an example here. It says the word remark, right? You can see the word remark. I'm kind of holding it. So, the word remark, the re has a sort of a recessive sound, which means that the sound is not that prominent, whereas the mark has a more prominent sound to it, right? So, in this will be called an iamb because it has 2 syllables. So an IAM has to basically fit two criteria that it needs to have 2 or 3 syllables. Like remark has 2 syllables, and one of those syllables has to be a recessive syllable, has to be like less prominent syllable, and one of them has to be a more prominent syllable, a more stressed syllable in the IAM, right? So and so a pentameter means 5. So basically, an iambic pentameter is a line that contains 5 iambs, right? I know this is a bit complicated, but I thought that since it's in the lessons, it's something that I should explain. Do you guys have any doubts till here? Was I able to explain it, or should I take another example? Can I give an example of an iambic pentameter? Yes, I can give an example. That's why I copy pasted this example right here. And okay, so let's read this out. Right. So, but soft. What? What? But soft. Right. So that's one I am. What light through yonder window breaks? So you see, like there, you could you hear like five sets of I ams here when I said but soft. One, what light? Two, through yonder. Three, window. Four, breaks. Five. So you saw that there were five sort of pairs of a less stressed and a more stressed syllable. So right. So Sumit, basically an I am. What an I am means is कि मतलब देखो हर word में there are certain syllables that are less stressed and that are more stressed. So if I say, for example, I say the word remark. Remark में the re is less stressed and the mark is more stressed, which means that when I'm saying the word, then I'm stressing more on one part of the word, right? So an iamb is basically a word with two syllables. In case of remark, we have two syllables, re and mark, and re is the less is the more is the unstressed syllable, and mark is the more stressed syllable. So an iamb is basically a set of two or three syllables where one of them is less stressed and the rest of them are more stressed. Does that clear it out? Sumit, does that clear it out? Should I move on? Okay. Right. So we can talking about the example. So it says, so like I read the first line and now the second line. It is the east and Juliet is the sun. It is first, the east second, and Juliet third is nay, nay, sorry, I'm sorry about that. And Juliet is the sun. So here also I see like there's sort of a pair of five I ams here where one of them is one where like the first syllable is a little less stressed and the next syllable is more stressed. So this is basically how both of these are sort of iambic pentameters. एक तो वर्ड ही इतना हैवी है मतलब मुझे तो देख के डर लग जाता है. Okay, so what are so here I've copy pasted some jargon about other characteristics of a sonnet. So basically there are a lot of types like they're like everybody after like Shakespeare सबको हुआ कि चलो हम like अपने type का sonnet लिखेंगे. So like a lot of people just wrote some stuff and then they called it a sonnet. So there are a lot of types and styles of sonnet. Some of them have a specific rhyme scheme. Like we can see here, the Spenserian sonnet is a 14-line poem developed by Edmund Spenser. So Mr. Spencer thought, ki, let's just make another brand of poetry which is completely my own. That varies English. That has basically three quatrains and has a specific rhyme scheme which is A B A B B C B C C D C D and E. So he also his sonnets basically had this particular rhyme scheme. So he made his own brand of sonnets. Very lovely guy. So right. So next we see like there are sonnets been written about modern love and basically these sonnets are trying to tell a dramatic story. So it's kind of coin or a sort of going relaying a persona of a person. So these types of sonnets are called sonnet sequence. So then there we have something called a crown of sonnets, which we can see right here. Is It's a composition of 15 sonnets that are linked by repetition of the final line of one sonnet as the initial line of the next. So basically, it's done in a sort of a chain-like manner. Ki matlab I finished one sonnet, and then from the last line of that one sonnet, I started writing another sonnet. I don't know how these people had so much time in their life to. Then we have the curtain sonnet, a shortened version of a sonnet, which basically has two verses of of क्या कहते हैं, three lines, and which has the rhyming scheme ABC and ABC. Right? So basically he was like कि मुझसे नहीं होगा इतना बड़ा तो मैं छोटा कर देता हूँ. So he did like he made the sonnet a little smaller in size. So this is basically it. If you are interested more in sonnets, you can definitely talk to me about it after this session. I love to help you with it and myself as well. So, do you guys have any other questions about sonnets, or do you want to see some examples or anything of that sort? So, should we move on to the next? Just give me 1 second. I'm really sorry. I kind of lost the feed. Yeah, so I'm back at it. So, should I move on? Are there any questions? Just give me a yes or a no so that I know that you guys are still hanging in there. Right. So, you want me to share more examples right now, or should we do that later? Okay. So, you want me to share an example? Uh, so let's find an example. Let's go on this link here. Yes, Snejatiya couplet is two rhyming lines. So this is our Gerard Manley Hopkins who decided to cut down on the sonnet. So this is a sonnet by him. And I'll just read it out. Glory be to God for dabbled things, for skies of couple color as a brinded cow, for rose moles all in stipple upon trout that swim, fresh fire coal chestnut falls, pinches wings, landscape plotted and pieced, pole follow and plow, all trades their gear and tackle into it and trim, all things counter, original, spare, and strange, whatever is fickle, freckled, who knows how, with swift, slow, sweet, sour, a dazzle dim, he fathers forth whose beauty is past change. Praise him. So basically, here he's talking about, I don't, basically talking about a Pied Piper, I suppose that's what I gather, or some sort of a, fatherly figure. So this is one of the examples of a sonnet. Something sonnets are basically romanticized. They're very they talk about a lot of romantic things, everything in a romantic sense. That's what's about. So let's also look here. So this is another one, and so even here you can see. So the first line goes like, "By this he knew she wept with waking eyes." So it's also some sort of romantic relationship. So it's just about something about love. That at his hands light quiver by her head, the strange low sobs that shook their common bed, were called into her with a sharp surprise and strangled mute like little gaping snakes. Dreadfully venomous to him she lay, stone still, and the long darkness flowed away with muffled pulses. Then, as midnight makes, her giant heart of memory and tears, drink the pale drug of silence, and so beat sleep's heavy measure they from head to feet. We are moveless, looking through their dead black ears, by vain regret scrawled over the blank wall, like sculptured effigies. Effigies, is that how it's pronounced? Anyway, they might be seen upon their marriage tomb, the sword between, each wishing for the sword that serves all. So this is also another example of a sonnet. Uh, and this is one part of it actually. This is just part one of it. So there's more to it. So yeah, and I guess we have covered enough of this now. So, and I hope the examples were helpful. So now we move on to the other styles of poetry. How is but soft and I am, and how is what light and I am. So it's like, dekho, it's an I am because I'm stressing more on the word. So when I'm reading the entire line, I am stressing more on the word light than the word what. And the what and light are single syllable words. So in that sense, there's a coupling of a syllable that's softer and a syllable that's harsher in the way that the poem is spoken. So yeah, individually these words, yeah. So individually, these words might not seem like they might not seem like I am. However, when spoken in the context of the line that I was reading and the flow of the poetry, it does form an I am, in the sense that there is one softer syllable and one, more stronger syllable. Does that answer the question, Ankita? I think her net is a bit slow, so the comments load way later. So, Ankita, you can message me about this. We'll discuss this out and yeah, definitely dig more into this, since even I am not that well versed that I can say with 100% certainty I am or not. But roughly so, it does seem like one to me, and hence I think I don't see any other I ams existing in that particular line. So, sure, we can take this up in more depth as such. So, yeah, now let's talk about other styles of poetry. So, a couplet. So, like Snehajyoti was saying, that this type of poem is two lines which might be rhymed or unrhymed. And one of the examples that I've taken here is Walt Whitman's To You. So, it reads, Stranger, if you passing meet me and desire to speak to me, why should you not speak to me? And why should I not speak to you? So this is just two lines, and it sort of works like a thought. So couplets are, they work more like thoughts, and usually they are rhymed. So that's about couplets, and then we'll come to ghazal in a while. So let's look at a lyric. So now lyrics. So when we're talking about our own free, and this was when what I was coming to when I was talking about the free verse. So usually when you want to like sort of express yourself or your feelings, as the poet, talk about your yeah, even I love him. I love the Dead Poet Society. It's a very very amazing movie. I don't know how many times I've seen it and cried while seeing it. So yeah. So a lyric. We were talking about a lyric. A lyric basically expresses thoughts and feelings of the poet. So when I was talking about the free verse, that's what I was coming at. That there are other forms of poetry as well that allow you to go all out with your emotions and talk about yourself. And lyric is one of them. It's basically what is used in songwriting. That's one form of poetry which can be all, you can all go free without the rhymes, just writing about yourself and your emotions. So that's something that you'd call a lyric more than a free verse. And then we have our traditional rhyme, which is similar sounds throughout the poem. We all know rhymes something that we've read throughout. Our entire exposure to poetry starts and ends with rhymes. Like we all ignore all these things in between that we talked about today, and so that's for rhymes. And then there are ghazals. So all of you know ghazals. There's Faiz Ahmad Faiz. There's a lot of writers who write ghazals, Urdu writers, and yeah. So ghazals are something that we will take up ghazals later as well when we talk about more indigenized forms of writing and more we talk about various other languages in which writing happens. So we'll take up ghazals later. So do you guys have any questions regarding all of these other forms of poetry that we just looked at? Yeah, it can be like ghazals, but also that ghazals are used to express a lot many other things than just the feelings of the poet. So yeah, in a way, yes, but a more it is a more peculiar form of poetry. Like we can say that a subset of ghazals might be lyrics, but not all of them. Yeah, sonnets are definitely the tough one. Like I'm really glad I don't have to study that formally. Rest is all easy. Like rest is something that all of you can experiment with. You can even experiment with sonnets. I'm sure that it's something that's doable. So, any questions at all? Anything you want to ask? And since I'm live today, any other thing you want to ask about the workshop in general, or any other doubts you have encountered so far? Anything at all? I'm open to answering any kinds of questions right now. When do you have to submit your assignments? And where do you submit them? So, are you talking about the assignments that were written in the lesson? So for those assignments, just wait right now. Don't do them right now. finish the task that I've scheduled, and we'll come to them later. Like, this isn't like school, ki bhai assignment submit karna hai or anything. I mean, if you feel like going further into different styles of poetry and something that you want to do, you can do it and mail it to me. But there's no compulsion on doing it. And if you do it and mail it to me, I'll definitely give you extensive feedback and reply. So if you want to go ahead, but ऐसे कोई compulsion नहीं है. It's something that you can do on your own time. But the task, yes, do the task because that will definitely help you in being more regular with your writing and being able to improve yourself. Quotes aren't poetry. Quotes are more like quotes aren't poetry. Quotes cannot classify as poetry because they're another genre of writing in and of itself, right? Writing quotes is something completely different. It's like quotes usually have a more meaning in the sense that they talk about life or they pass on a lesson, something like that. So quotes are completely a different type of writing altogether. So you can't say that they classify as poetry. So, anything else that anyone wants to ask or talk about? Or if you guys are facing any problems, issues writing, is any one of you hitting a writer's block? Or just facing creativity issues, or if you think you're not making stuff that's good enough to put out there, any those sort of issues that you're facing that you want to discuss with me, you can obviously message me on WhatsApp anytime. I'm usually available and I usually respond quickly. And I just want you to know that, like, it's great that you guys have joined this workshop. And I'm sure you've joined this workshop because you want to continue writing. And I know that there are like a lot of people out there, you feel like they're better writers than you, etc. But like everything else, like every other art, writing is about practice. So the more you practice, the more you get feedback from people who are honest to you, the more you will improve. And if you keep at it, if you keep going at it, I'm sure that all of you have the potential. And I've seen your work, I've seen the assignments, etc. I'm pretty sure all of you have the potential to become like really good writers. And some of you are, and most of you are already so, but obviously there's always room for improvement. So keep writing, and if you face any sort of hurdles or issues, anything, any emotional issues with poetry or writing, any writer's block, anything at all, you can obviously approach me, and I'll make sure that I'm able to help you out of it, or at least nudge you in the right direction, and so that you can, help yourself. So, if anybody does not have any questions, I think we'll call it a day. Thank you everyone for attending. If you have any feedback about this session, if you didn't like the way something was done, if you disagree with something I said or anything of that sort, you can always message on the WhatsApp group. Your feedback is extremely important as it will help me to, make the upcoming sessions better and in a more conducive manner to you guys, and make sure that everyone has a good good experience, and we have fun and all. So yes, good night for today, and if you have any feedback, please do let me know. So bye bye.